The Auburn Express.
You are now listening to the War Report LAUB Podcast. With your boy Ike Jones.
LAUB Podcast, you got Ike Jones in here. Hopefully everybody is having a good day. We are a few hours away from the tip-off of Auburn versus Texas A&M live in Neville Arena. Auburn is set to go there, and it's going to be an interesting game. Looking forward to seeing what the Tigers are able to do in this one. Hopefully everybody's having a good day out here in the land of the Tigers. And you got Ike Jones, man. We're ready to get into this conversation. If you're listening to this right now, go ahead and do us the necessary, and that's sharing the content as always. Go out there and hit that like button. Make sure you do all of those things and subscribe to the channel if you can. We're going to just get straight into this conversation right now. Texas A&M is coming in here after taking a loss to LSU in their first SEC matchup. Unexpected there. Texas A&M is predicted to finish second in the SEC, so losing to an LSU team that was not predicted to finish very high in the SEC was probably an unexpected situation, but I'm sure they're going to have some resolve coming into Neville Arena tonight. Auburn, of course, fresh off of a shellacking, an absolute spit roast of the Arkansas Razorbacks on the road there. So this is going to be the first home action that Auburn has had in conference, but a team that Auburn has had some trouble with traditionally, really, I think something like 3 of the last 4 and 7 of the last 8 or something crazy like that. Like they just haven't really had a good go at it versus Texas A&M recently. Buzz has seemed to have Buzz Williams, the Texas A&M coach, has seemed to have the number of the Auburn Tigers, regardless of where the matchup has been, whether it's been regular season, postseason. Of course, the spectacular loss to Texas A&M in the second round of the SEC tournament 2 years ago with the Jabari Walker team there in Tampa. And then, of course, you have them ending the home winning streak of Auburn, most recently there in Neville Arena last season. So this has been a team that has, regardless of how they've started the season, has had Auburn's number. So this is a time for Auburn to really get in here and figure out a way to get this win. If you look at the ESPN predictor on this, it has Auburn winning at 82.3%. But listen, you got to play the game. You can't predict the game. You got to play the game. So we're going to look and see how Auburn can get the victory here. If you are checking out like stat sheets and things of that nature, you're going to have to look at, of course, Wade Taylor IV. He has been a menace against Auburn, and he has been their top scorer so far this season. Scoring at 18 points per game, shooting 38% from the field and 82.4% from the free throw line. He has been their most dynamic scorer, a high usage player, so someone that Auburn is definitely familiar with. So he's going to be a guy that's going to have his hands on the ball. They're going to run the offense through him a lot, and it's going to be incumbent upon the guard play of Auburn to be able to match the intensity that he's going to bring. He's going to be a guy that's going to. They're going to put in a lot of pick and roll situations, and they're going to try to get him going downhill towards the basket. So Auburn needs to do a good job of being able to stay in front of him in those pick and rolls or switch as effectively as possible to make sure that he is not going to get the kind of looks that he wants to be able to. He is not kind of the traditional guard that Auburn has had issues with that's had height. He is a shorter guard, but he's given Auburn trouble just because he is a crafty guard and he has an ability to kind of step his game up in situations. So that's one thing. Then you look at the other guy who's given Auburn problems over the last couple of years, and that's going to be Tyrese Boots Radford. He has been dealing with some injuries so far this season, so he hasn't been the same guy, but he was able to play the last 2 games for Texas A&M, and so this is going to be his 3rd game of action in a row. They are going to be a different offensive team when he's available there. He, as well, is another high-usage guy. So there's an opportunity for them to kind of get in a groove now because they're back at closer to full strength. So Auburn's going to need to match their guard play in intensity and effectiveness. This game, in my opinion, is going to come down to what the last few games for Texas A&M versus Auburn have been, and that's going to be physicality. So let's get over into the keys of the game for Auburn that I have listed here. And I think one of the biggest keys for Auburn in this game is going to be the defensive glass. Texas A&M doesn't shoot a great percentage from the field. They're not super high in their efficiency, but what they do an excellent job of, better than most teams in the country, is being able to generate second possessions. So being able to attack the offensive glass for Texas A&M is just kind of part of what they do strategically, because they don't shoot particularly well from the outside. They're not a high three-point shooting team as far as their effectiveness and their efficiency. So when you look at them from the field, let's take a look at what they have statistically on the season right now. They are shooting 92, only 92 makes in 346 attempts on the season so far. So just they're not particularly great. 26.6% on three-pointers on the season, but they shoot a decent amount of them, but they rebound the glass effectively, and that's how they're able to really get out there and keep teams at bay, is because they're able to generate second possessions for themselves. So Auburn securing the defensive glass, something that Auburn struggled with earlier in this season, have done a better job of struggled with earlier in this season, not allowing people to get to the offensive glass, is something they're going to need to be more effective in this game versus Texas A&M, because, again, this is one of the better teams in the country at being able to generate second and third possessions by making sure that they can go get to the offensive glass, particularly when you think about guys like Henry Coleman III. He's been a guy who his physicality has bothered Auburn. They don't really have that guy off the bench like they had last season that was really going to just be able to beat you up. But Henry Coleman is an effective guy in the post, a good post scorer. And that's been their big three for the last couple of seasons, and they are back and ready to do damage this game. But again, the defensive glass is going to be a big thing for Auburn in this game. The second thing, and this is also an effective thing that Texas A&M does better than most teams in the country, and that's getting to the free throw line. So Auburn is going to need to be able to be physical and defend without fouling. It's going to be interesting to see how the refs are calling this game early. Auburn fans definitely lament the fact that it feels as if the whistles have been uneven in the last couple of matchups with Texas A&M, where they've been able to be physical with Auburn, but Auburn has not been able to reciprocate that physicality, and it's taken some guys like Janai Broome out of games early with foul trouble. So if Auburn is able to defend without fouling effectively, or if the whistles are tight and both teams have to play a little bit less physical, it's going to be interesting to see, because Auburn is a more effective offensive team. So if Texas A&M is not allowed to be as physical as they typically are, then Auburn's going to have more liberty and freedom of movement. So that's going to mean that they're going to be more effective offensively. And because a lot of what they do is predicated on their ability to be physical and get in there and mix it up. So Auburn needs to be able to meet that physicality. That was a big differentiating factor, I feel, in the game versus Arkansas, as Auburn was the more physical team in that game. So when you're allowed to be physical and play the type of defense that Bruce Pearl wants you to be, you have to be able to do that, but do it without fouling. So sending Texas A&M to the free throw line, that's pretty much a strategic portion of what they do in their game, is we're going to get to the free throw line to be able to generate points, because they don't shoot particularly well. Now, the last couple of games, particularly the last game at home versus Texas A&M, those two aforementioned guards, Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford, shot out of their minds for portions of that game, where it was just like, yo, what are you supposed to do against this? Like, they're just pulling up in, not even really in transition, in like a secondary break and shooting threes. When they're shooting that effectively, they're a difficult team to beat. So a portion of what you have to be able to do at Auburn is just guard against the three, make it contested shots, and live with the results. But make sure that you're securing your defensive glass and not getting so anxious to get out there and run, because Auburn has been functioning really well with tempo and secondary break offense this season. Not so anxious to get out there and run that you're not doing an effective job of boxing out and securing the defensive glass. That's going to be a huge key for Auburn in this game, to make sure that they're doing that. And then the third the key is going to be the opposite, on the opposite end of the floor, and defensively, as far as generating turnovers, particularly live ball turnovers. Auburn is going to need to get out and run in this game. Texas A&M does a good job in the half-court defense. They really defend against the flex. Buzz Williams always has a really good idea of how he wants to defend that. The difference this year, Auburn has better three-point shooting out there, so Texas A&M's not going to be able to sag in and clog the paint in the way that they have been traditionally if Auburn's going to be shooting the ball effectively from the outside. I look forward to seeing when that second wave of offensive players come in, with you have your KD Johnsons, your Chad Baker Mazzaras come into the game, how well and even with potentially having Trey Donaldson out there, how well they are able to stretch the floor against Texas A&M when they are going to the bench, because that is going to be a key piece in this game for me. Is Auburn generating turnovers for sure and getting out into transition, but making sure when they do are able to get out there, if it's not a live ball turnover, to be able to be effective in the half court in that second unit. But generating turnovers is going to be a key portion of this. Wade Taylor is right now, when you look at, he's a high usage rate guy, but he is second in the conference right now in total turnovers per game. Or in his turnover efficiency. So he is a guy, meaning like he turns the ball over a lot. Right. So he's a guy who can turn the ball over to you if you're going to be able to put pressure on him. Auburn's going to have to figure out a way to do that, to take them out of their rhythm, to make sure that he is a guy that's giving the ball up and take him out of the game as much as possible. Going to be very interesting to see how they decide to defend him. Again, Auburn hasn't traditionally had big guards, so that hasn't really been a thing where they can just, hand up and disrupt what he's doing. He wants to get downhill. He wants to be able to get to the lane and get to the line afterwards. Defending without fouling and making him turn the ball over, putting him in situations where he feels uncomfortable and he's making silly mistakes and passes to be able to get out into the transition. It's going to be a key point for Auburn in this game. All right. Appreciate you guys jumping in here with me. Definitely want to get into some comments that you all have going on here. We are here inside LAUB Town talking a little Auburn basketball. Appreciate you all dropping in with me. Go to the comment section to see what you all are marinating on. Daniel Owen, I'll get it started off with you saying, having a bad day, need to see Auburn drop 90+ tonight. That's going to be difficult. I mean, Texas A&M doesn't give up those kind of scores typically. I mean, right now, points against per game for Texas A&M, 66.7. That is the average points that they are surrendering per game. Going to be a game in which Auburn, I think, is going to have to grind it out a little bit. If Auburn is able to score in that kind of range where they're putting up 90, this is going to be a blowout. I don't think Auburn gives up anywhere close to that. So if Auburn scores in the 90s, this is going to be a big-time blowout. When you look at Texas A&M over the season, points that they've scored in games, 78, 73. Let's just look at their P5 games versus Ohio State. 73 points in a win there versus Ohio State. The Penn State game, they scored 89 points in a win there. Scored 89 points versus FAU in a loss. Now, FAU is a team that went to the Final Four last season. They put up 96 in that game versus them. So only a 7-point loss. So, again, if Auburn scores the 90, look for a score that's going to be similar to that FAU game. Against Ohio State, scored 73 in a win. Only 47 points versus Virginia in a very ugly game where Virginia scored 59 in that game. That Memphis game, they lost that one pretty handily, 81-75, and then versus Houston. But I believe Memphis was one of those games where Radford did not play. I know he did not play versus Houston. They had 66 in that game, surrendering 70 points to Houston. But maybe it was Houston and Houston Christian that he missed those games. So I knew he missed back-to-back games, but he was there for the Prairie View and LSU games. So if Auburn scores 90 in this one, I feel really good about Auburn's chances. I don't believe that they're going to surrender more than 90 points to this Texas A&M team because, again, it's a team that really, unless they're shooting at some sort of ridiculous high efficiency, which Auburn has done well in defensive efficiency so far this season, that they're not going to be scoring a ton of points just because a lot of what they're going to get is going to be off of offensive rebounds, resets, and that sort of thing. Looking forward to seeing how the physicality of Auburn is able to limit them, but they can get out in transition to be able to play at a tempo that Texas A&M is not comfortable with. Corey Weber asked the question, can this be the year we out-physical A&M? I certainly hope so. Again, I believe the physicality in this game is going to be important. It's going to be interesting, again, early how the officials are calling this game. How this game is officiated is going to be highly contingent on really what the direction of this game goes. If Auburn's going to be handicapped by the whistles in this one, or if it's not going to feel like it's even in the whistles where Texas A&M is being physical and Auburn's not allowed to match that physicality, it's going to be a tough game for Auburn. I just want Auburn to be physical but not feel as if they really have to get into a shoving match, right? Like, be sound in your physicality and don't let frustration with the physical play of Texas A&M take you out of your game. Justin Thomas jumping in and says, I love going watching other teams after we beat them down like Arkansas and Indiana. It is going to be interesting to see how Arkansas bounces back after this game. Indiana actually looked good in some games subsequent to the Auburn beatdown. So now Auburn has not won any close games so far this game. It's pretty much been if it's close, Auburn loses, and if not, then it's going to be a blowout in Auburn's direction. So Auburn needs to figure out how to get or how to play better in close games. This may be the game that they need to play close at home, so you can get some confidence in your ability to close out teams in a game that is going to be less than 10. It's going to be decided by 10 points or less. So, looking forward to seeing that. But I would not be mad at what we have here with the Walker Show saying, "Can Auburn have 2 beatdowns in a row?" Listen, I welcome them beating down Texas A&M and finding a quick a close game victory somewhere else. I'm not mad at that. Ant Robinson jumps in and says, hopefully Auburn can pull one out. The refs have cheated us in both of the games last year. I think that the officiating in both of those games last year felt a little uneven from the Auburn perspective. Of course, I have some orange and blue goggles that I'm viewing that through, but I do believe that there were times in those games where it just felt as if Auburn could do nothing right as far as the whistles were concerned, and Texas A&M could do no wrong. So the physicality of this game is going to be important, but the officiating is going to be paramount, that it remains consistent. Just be consistent in the way that you're officiating things. Let's see. Tatiana asks, is Texas A&M good at three-pointers or three-point throws? I don't know if you meant free throws or three-pointers, but I'll answer both of them. Texas A&M on the season, I think I talked about this a little bit, from the three-point line, 26.6, so not particularly good there. Free throws, 70.2%. That's a pretty good percentage. It's nothing to write home about, but it is a pretty decent free throw percentage. Not sure where that ranks amongst the conference, but I could probably take a look at that later. But right now, they are decent at the free throw line, but what they major in is volume. What they really want to do is be able to shoot a lot of them. So if they only shoot 70%, they're still going to get 20, 30 points from the free throw line. And that's been a way that they've been beating teams really under Buzz Williams, is aggressive offense, getting to the free throw line, allowing themselves opportunities to be able to score points there. Let's see. Valencia asked the question, Ike, are they as deep as Auburn? No team is as deep as Auburn, so of course not, but their rotation consists of 6 guys, that are playing above 20 minutes per game. So the vast majority of their stuff is coming from 6 guys. When they go to the bench, they have 3 other guys that are playing above 10 minutes per game. So yeah, they're really a 7-man rotation primarily, and then they have some other guys that fill in, so they're not going to be able to go 10 deep the way Auburn does and just kind of go point for point. They've got a point guard that can come in and be as good as their other point guard. They really want to be able to have one of their guys, Radford or Wayne Taylor, on the court at all times. If both of them are off of the court at any given time, look for Auburn to pull a run off during those times, just because, again, their guard play is not going to be as consistent. And I mean, maybe they have some guys that can step up. These are all Power 5 players, so I don't want to discount them. But as far as their minutes distribution, it's heavily favored towards their starting 6, and then they have a 7th that's going to be running a lot of their minutes. So definitely not as deep. Let's see what else we got here. Corey jumps back in. Baker Mazzara said he was talking trash in Spanish and still was called for a tech. I think it was just the aggressive nature by which he said it. They just figured he said something flagrant. They was like, hey, I don't know what you said, but I don't like it. But yeah, I did see that quote from him talking about he don't even know how they knew what he said because he said something in Spanish. I thought both of the tech calls that they got were kind of weak. I mean, yes, both of the guys said something, but they weren't like making any overt gestures. They didn't really. It was like one word over to the bench. Listen, Jabari Smith said way more than that at multiple times to guys and never got teed up for. He got teed up a couple of times, but like, can we get back to like just letting guys let them talk a little junk? It's okay to say something, but I just think that they were kind of aware of what the tense nature of that rivalry has been, and they were trying to keep it under wraps because it had already gotten testy early in that game with the physicality. So the referees, I think, were a little on pins and needles and trying to stop anything from escalating in that game. I think it was a little weak though. Justin Thomas jumps back in and says, Chris Moore playing like Zep Jasper, not a bad thing. I love what Chris Moore brings to this team. There are a lot of people who kind of overlook the contributions of guys like Chris Moore, who's not going to show up in the stat sheet, especially in the way he scores, and think that, oh man, a guy like Chad Baker-Mazara, who scores the way that he does, should get a starting nod over Chris. I think I like the way that the starting lineup is with Chris Moore because he brings so much from a physical intensity and a defensive standpoint. He allows you to be multiple in the way that you switch. Not to say that Chad Baker can't be, but from a physical standpoint, Chris Moore is much more of a physical specimen, of course, just the way that he's built. But he's a sticky defender, and he allows you to be able to have Chad come off of the bench and be an ignition for your second team offensively. So I like what Chris Moore is bringing to this first unit, and hopefully he can continue to be an igniter of the defense and a guy who can get to the glass, or at least keep others off of the glass and be contributing in ways. He's what I like to call a glue guy. He's a guy that, again, you don't really see what he's doing. He's not one of the outward pieces that you see, but he makes things work because of the way that he's able to come in and handle business on the court that goes unseen a lot of the times. So definitely looking forward to it. Let's see here. Who else is in here? Tatiana, I don't really do score predictions, but she asked me for a score prediction in this one. I don't really do score predictions because, listen, games can go a lot of different ways. What I'd like to see is a game in which Auburn scores somewhere in the 70s and holds Texas A&M into the low 60s. So, I mean, there's a couple of score predictions that are right below that echo that. Auburn 72-63 says Justin Thomas. The Walker Show 73-62. That's right around where I'd like to see this game be. Corey Weber 78-68. I'd be fine with that. Valencia, this is a little ambitious, 85-70. I think that's going to be a difficult one to pull off. But I think if you can hold Texas A&M in the 70s and you can score into the 80s, of course, from a number standpoint, you win that game. But that's right around where you, if you can hold Texas A&M into the 60s and you can be in the 70s, that's right around where I think a good basketball game for Auburn would be tonight. Because, again, when we're looking at Texas A&M and what they're surrendering on the season, let me go back into that. I lost it for some reason. What did I just? All right, here we go. On the season, Texas A&M is surrendering 66.7 points per game. So if you can get into the 70s on them, and they're scoring 74.5 points per game, Auburn is averaging giving up 65.6 points per game. So what I'm asking Auburn to do is continue to hold people to their average that they're giving up, but get above what Texas A&M is surrendering per game. If the points per game average defensively holds, Auburn loses a close one. If the points per game offensive averages hold, Auburn scoring 84. Ooh, where did I get that for? 84.7, and Texas A&M scoring 74.5. Then Auburn wins that game. So somewhere in the middle of that, Auburn scoring a little bit below their average, you holding Texas A&M a little bit below their average. Auburn wins in a 70-60 type affair, mid-70s to mid-60s affair is what I would like to see. Let's see here. A lot of score predictions that have Auburn in the 80s. Listen, I think that if Auburn gets into the 80s, 90s again, I think that this is going to be a comfortable victory for Auburn. I just don't see us surrendering those kind of points to a team in Texas A&M that doesn't really want to get into an up and down the court kind of matchup. So they're going to be wanting to slow the pace down, turn it into a half-court game. Auburn's going to want to do the exact opposite. So I think the pace is going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch in this game as well, to see how Texas A&M is getting up and down the floor and whether or not Auburn's able to generate those live ball turnovers and get out into transition. But looking forward to seeing what happens in this game. Hopefully Auburn comes away with the victory. Again, appreciate you guys for jumping in here with us. We're a couple of hours away from the tip on this one, but wanted to go ahead and get something for you guys to marinate on here with basketball. And I got some other things I want to do basketball-wise after we get into the after this game. We'll have some more stuff film-wise in basketball because I think I'll have enough things of Power 5 competition, specifically in the SEC, to see how Auburn is looking at some things. So stay on lookout for that if you are a member. All right, I'm about to get out of here. Once again, I appreciate you all jumping in with me. It's your guy, Ike Jones. Share the video, like the video, subscribe, and all of those things. And we'll be back at you guys soon with some more. And we'll probably do a post-game tonight, so stay tuned for that. Till the next time, and as always, War Eagle.